And I'll be in the background
Okay.
today.
Okay, my background colleague.
Mhm.
Hello, hello everyone. I'm Reverend Jack Sullivan Jr., our Director of Ohio Council of Churches, and we welcome you to another installment of our Faith Leaders Zooms. This week we are talking with Toby Hoover, who is the founder and the executive director of the Ohio Coalition Against Gun Violence. The coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that works to prevent gun violence through education, advocacy, and public awareness. Coalition is the state's recognized resource on current information regarding gun violence and gun-related legislation. It monitors current developments at the national levels and state levels and provides statewide education on nonviolence and safety for children and families. It works with other organizations, particularly now the Ohio Council of Churches and individuals, to facilitate community solutions and support public health recognition of the gun violence problem itself. Important work of the coalition. And once more, I'm happy that the Ohio Council of Churches was a collaborative partner, and the council is moving ever so closely to fully embracing an anti-gun violence or a reduction of gun violence posture and priority for its own life and work. So I'm very happy on behalf of our council to welcome Toby to our forum for today. And I'd like for us to begin our time before Toby speaks to us about the work of the coalition with prayer. Let us pray. Oh, gracious God, we thank you for conferring onto us a vision of human wholeness, human flourishing, and you've given us ways to solve our conflicts non-violently and in non-lethal forums. Even though we understand that we may and can do these things, violence continues to haunt us. Gun violence in particular claims the lives of untold numbers of people. Sometimes the shootings are one-on-one, and sometimes they are mass shootings. But no shooting is part of your vision for humanity. No gun violence is part of your vision for how we should live. So we thank you for the coalition and Toby's leadership over the years that has led the charge to reduce gun violence in Ohio and beyond. We ask your blessings on our time together this afternoon, that we may together arrive at a new sense of a prioritized way to live, a way to live that helps us live more as agents for the reduction of gun violence in Ohio and beyond. Through Christ we pray, amen. Amen. Well, welcome, Toby. I'm glad you are with us today, and the virtual floor is yours to talk about the work of the coalition, your work in founding it, and where we are right now with respect to gun violence and laws in Ohio and the nation.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was a very nice introduction and a better yet prayer, because that's part of what you and I have been talking about as far as I think you said it earlier somewhere, that we being part of the Council of Churches family, and this whole language thing and what people need to hear is just so important. We started out back in 1996, and that was with the Toledo Metropolitan Mission, which unfortunately does not exist anymore. And I worked with the Interracial Religious Coalition because there had been so many shootings of young people. And it was kind of cute, actually, because in order for me to attend their meetings, they had to put me on the payroll. So they paid me $1 and so that I could be on the payroll. I could be on the meetings. And they were ever so helpful with a lot of things that, I could go into detail about some of the things that happened that they were helpful with. But we got started down there because of young people being shot. Mm-hmm. And from there, we quickly moved to what was happening at the state level. They were trying to pass concealed carry. And so We were against that then, and we're against it now. So it's been a long, ongoing trauma, actually, to have to put up with what they want to change and how easy they want to make it and all that.
Mhm.
So from there, we kept there working that way until we formed our own 501c3 and became the Ohio group. And I would say that we are the only statewide gun violence prevention group that is run right here in the state. There are other groups that are around. They're all connected to national organizations. And so that's good too. But so everybody has their own unique role there.
Mhm.
Been working with a lot of those things over the years. First thing we did was pass 3 local ordinances in Toledo. And we were very, very proud of that. And one of the people that opposed said, "You're going to be sorry, we're going to take care of this." I didn't actually realize at the time that 5 or 6 years later, they would pass preemption. They did take care of it, where the cities couldn't do a thing, and their hands are just tied as far as on this issue completely. So, we've done that. Now, over the years, we've done a little bit of everything, teaching children, teaching adults, speaking engagements, a lot of time at the State House, trying to make people listen, trying to give them facts and documentation of why our opinion was what it was. And it looks, if you looked at it, you would say, well, you weren't very successful. You didn't pass anything. You had to look at it from how many people did you educate in the process, because the media and the public were getting all of that information because we were there. And how long were you able to keep some things from happening? We postponed concealed carry in Ohio for 7 years until they finally passed it. So it was a long, long fight. And then from there on, that was passed in 2004. From there on in, we have just watched it all deteriorate ever since. And so much like what we will see in the US Congress, that we just see that people just keep coming up with more and more ideas that deteriorate how we're all living.
Yeah.
And the laws don't seem to be able to make the difference right now because most of these elected people won't let it happen. Now, if they were honest with you, as some have been in my past and said to me, their first priority is to be reelected. That is always what's on their mind. Yeah. And so that keeps them from doing sometimes what they think is the right thing to do. And so that's what we're seeing a lot of. That has continued through. And like you said, we've been part of things at the national level. With all the national groups, been to Washington, D.C. numerous times, spoke at a press conference, was part of events, was at one of the hearings that Gabby Gifford spoke at. And so it goes on and on and on, and those connections are so strong and so good for any group to have, because then you get a bigger picture of what's going on around the country and what they're trying to do. And so I served, I formed the coalition with Reverend Martin Donnelly, who was, you're smiling, did you know him?
No.
Oh, okay. You would have liked him. You would have liked him. He's not here anymore, but he had the energy and just the truthfulness of being able to speak about what this was about, that people were listening. I mean, he was a man, made for social justice. Wow. So we formed this organization and went on from there. Like I say, I served on national boards and national committees. As a matter of fact, I think I owe you a messaging book that I served on that committee for 2 or 3 years, and always trying to find the answer. And from the beginning and now more than ever, I think it's important that we're talking about what culture are we living in and what culture do we want to live in. And so if we don't change our attitudes about how we are accepting this, so many people are just, well, that's what happens in this country. That's what we have to put up with. No, we have to change how we see this, and we have to change how we're talking about.
Mhm.
And that's what I think, that the council is going to come across very strongly in talking, not so much about the instrument itself as it is about the violence and the fact that we see this culture differently.
Mm.
So go on to that. And, we have worked with all of those things and messaging along the way,
Mhm.
and worked on national things as far as assault weapon ban, worked on that, and then worked on it, trying to get it renewed, and they did away with it. And look what we've seen. So, that's a good part to talk about. Right now, this last 2 weeks, I was supposed to be on vacation. And I'm supposed to be retired. And of course, that's when the Supreme Court rules that New York can't say that somebody has to have a good purpose in order to carry a handgun. And so they unfortunately ruled in a way that's going to make other state laws change, because the other side will go in and challenge them.
Mhm.
And then cities get to the point, and states get to the point where they can't afford to keep these challenging. And so, it keeps happening. In Ohio, they even have bills in there that we don't have to listen to what the US government says on guns. I mean, it's fanatical, and you watch it move from state to state, which we have watched permitless carry just pass. And now there are organizations, as in Amnesty International, feels very strongly about repealing that. So I think that's going to be a good partnership with them, because they see it clearly about what it means and how it's taking that next step to all of us just accepting guns everywhere. Everybody's got a gun. Everybody's got one in their pocket, no matter where you go. That's the attitude that can change, and they seem to be, really going after that. So it's a strong leadership, and a strong leadership within an Ohio group that we have called the Ohio Coordination Group. We have national people, state people that are working on the issue, no matter who they're connected to. Some are maybe a church group, some of them are, moms, some of them are legislators, all over the place. And so we've come together on a number of things. Stand Your Ground and this permitless carry recently were the strongest things. So combine those two things, and you see the danger we're in when you tell everybody they can carry a gun, and then tell them they can stand their ground anytime they're afraid and think they need to defend themselves with a weapon. So those can't make us all safer, certainly can't make us all more civil. And we see all of that happening. And to me, it's just continues to be a deterioration of, what we're doing. So I guess, with that, I would like to be retired. Because I am also a survivor of a gun violence victim. I will never be able to retire from the cause, from the issue, because you just can't. You've lost someone, and that is part of what makes you who you are now. I guess like any other disease or survival, it makes you stronger somehow, because you know that you're doing the right thing by continuing to work on the cause.
Mhm.
So that's, what I'm doing now. And I'm, look forward to being able to, be part of, I think you said in one thing that you just put out, that we were becoming part of the family.
Mhm.
Kathy and I liked that, becoming part of the family. Yeah, we thought that sounded really nice. Supreme Court ruled this week. We kind of knew that was going to happen with the people that have been put on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
It was kind of inevitable that they were going to say, no, you can't do that. So now we're going to pay the price of that. And then within days, the Congress finally passed one of the biggest bills they passed on gun violence in, I think, 30 years. And that takes in all kinds of things. Matter of fact, I wrote down some things because I knew I wouldn't remember them all. One of them is funding for states to enforce and come up with an extreme risk protection act. And there are a couple of them that have been introduced, but they don't even give them any hearings in Ohio. So we'll see if part of that makes a difference. They're going to address the dating and intimate partner loophole. You couldn't keep people from buying guns if they were violent towards somebody they were dating, but they could have something against them. They couldn't have a gun if it was their wife or their girlfriend or the mother of their child or whatever.
Boyfriend loophole, they call it.
Yeah. And so that's long overdue. And so enhanced background checks for people under 21, that was directed obviously towards these young men that are getting so angry, going in with assault weapons and shooting up schools and other venues. They're all in that certain age group. They get a hold of an assault weapon. I used to have a video that I showed all the time that you can show somebody shooting 120 bullets in less than a minute, even though you have to change the magazine 4 times. If you know what you're doing, that's how fast you can do it. So there's just no reason for it, and there's nobody that's going to be able to fight that. That person has all the power at that moment because they don't have to aim; they just have to keep pulling the trigger. And so then they're very, very successful. So I understand why they want to have some way of increasing how young people get a hold of these long guns and these assault weapons. It's a little bit, I don't know, a little bit scary. They're going to be reviewing juvenile records. And so you don't, in some cases, you say, great, they've been being looked at for being violent since they were 10 years old. So yeah, let's not let them have one, okay? But it does bring up, a lot of different questions. So that was the third thing. The fourth thing is the gun trafficking. And they're going to establish some clear lines and define and penalize the sellers and the straw purchases according to what they're doing. And they've been able to get away with this stuff for so long. Unfortunately, they're still allowing guns to be sold by unlicensed dealers. And that's too bad, because that's a whole business. Whole business is going up. And they're going to update the language around licensed sellers, because it's always, and I don't know what the number is right now, but it's always been that if you sold more than a certain number of guns in a month or a year or whatever, then you were a dealer and you shouldn't be doing that. Well, they would just say it's their private collection, and then they'd sell them that way. So they're going to update that language, but unfortunately, they'll still be able to do it. So that's kind of the new one that Biden just passed. And even though everybody's mad at him for just about anything you can possibly think of, including the weather, this is one thing that he's been able to get done and be able to sign it. So big step forward when the fact is that you had Mitch McConnell sign this. I mean, it was some kind of miracle, I think. I don't know. Because we thought the killing of all those youngsters in Sandy Hook was enough to move everybody.
We all did.
And so did everybody else, the adults, the kids. And then the kids down at Parkland, said, okay, well, we're the young people, we'll make a difference. And then they found out they just couldn't make it happen. To see it happen again and again and again, at least something happened this time. So at least they're going to figure out that they can talk about this and they can come up with solutions. So that's the hope there. So this last week was about bad news from the Supreme Court and finally some good news from the Congress.
Finally, yes, finally.
Yeah. So you said to me, I think once when we were talking about it, what now? And I want to keep using the phrase that they always use from all the national calls that I'm on, that you have to keep remembering that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I've been doing this for 30 years. That's more than just a marathon. But as I said earlier, that's just the way it is. As you well know, Jack, you've lost someone. Eventually everybody in the country will have lost someone that they love,
Yeah.
that they know, to gun violence. And then they're going to say, well, maybe we ought to look at this. One of the my favorite things to do is when somebody disagrees that we shouldn't have any laws, because nobody's going to, just good guys are going to do it, but not the bad guys and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
They say that, do you personally know anybody where you work or, in your family, the person that lives next door in your neighborhood? Do you know anyone that you feel really shouldn't have a gun and certainly shouldn't be carrying one? And there's like this, they stop and think, well, yeah, I happen to know a lot of people that I don't think ought to have one. Well, the dilemma is how do you say that some people can have them and some people can't? And it comes back to what we have always strongly felt is that you don't give approval for something that you think shouldn't be out there.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to everybody having weapons, and I do always refer to them as weapons because that's what they are, that's what they're made for, then I can't say, well, it's okay if you have a gun if you're a good guy. Yeah. And what that does is the good guy, bad guy thing just adopts the gun lobby's, mantra of what they always say is good guys and bad guys. We can't reduce this down to a good guy, bad guy argument, because I jump in there and say for sure that we were all born good guys, I think. I mean, it's the way we always started, So you don't know what's going to happen, that all of a sudden somebody is pushed over the edge. And it can happen to anybody, whether that's anger or fear or disease, what it is. The police chief in one of the small towns where I live committed suicide because his physical illness was causing him to see no hope and to see how he was deteriorating and what it was doing to his family. He used his gun to kill himself. And so it can happen to anybody with any kind of training. It doesn't make any difference. We're all weak human beings. So I totally dismiss the good guy, bad guy theory.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me. So those things are all happening. Now you can add to that, what we've done in schools, how we've asked kids to pledge not to use guns, the events, the Wear Orange every year, the, what month is gun violence prevention, and all of those things I think play a part in what we still need to do. But we also need that strong messaging about not accepting this way of life, not to normalize this way. And I saw something, and I'm sorry that I'm going to have to find it now. Well, Kathy, the wizard, will find it. That somebody said that they have gotten some agreement from a lot of the people in Hollywood about they've got to back off some of the violence that they're showing in what they're producing. And even though, every time there's been a bill down there, the people who own the guns would say, that's not what caused it. No, that's not what caused it, but it is what normalizes how we think about this behavior. It's not normal to do all these cruel things to one another. And yet it seems like there's more and more of that. So I'm hopeful that will play a small part in it as well. So now you've got, young people, moms, media and entertainment, faith leaders everywhere, law enforcement everywhere, that are all coming and they're all saying something. I have to tell you that 30 years ago, if I picked up the paper and I saw that there was anything mentioning guns, we would get all excited. We say, oh my gosh, somebody said something about guns, because it didn't happen. Now, as you all know, you see it everywhere, every day. So the other exciting thing that's happening right now is that the repeal of the permitless carry. And also, all of a sudden, all of these Ohio senators, Democrats, got together and introduced a bill, Senate Bill 351. And what they did was they took all of the other things that they had been trying to get hearings on that weren't going anywhere, and they threw them into one bill to see if they can get somewhere, which I thought was really brave of them and a nice reaction, because realistically, they knew in an election year, they're not going to get hearings on all this stuff. So that, they want sales to all be through a dealer. They want a background check every time a gun is transferred. They want to raise the minimum age purchase to 21. That was one of the things I was very disappointed in, as far as the national bill that just was signed, is that it did not address that. And it, why not? 21 just didn't seem like it was like asking a lot, but for some reason they didn't want to go there. Increase the penalty for furnishing a gun to an underage person. And let's see, establish the extreme risk protection, prohibit negligent storage, and include a tax credit. I don't know if any of you are aware of the fact that somebody introduced a bill earlier this year. You could actually have a tax credit if you got a firearm safe. And, people listen to money and, and not paying taxes sometimes when they won't listen to anything else.
Money still talks.
Yeah, it does. So for me, if I had to look at two things over these years that were the biggest deteriorations, that was passing concealed carry, because it said, I can go to the grocery store, I'm standing next to somebody. It is what we call hidden. So I was referred to it as loaded hidden guns. And do you really want to be in that position? And preemption, when they passed that and said, no city can pass anything on guns. Those are the two things that have kept any progress for us to keep moving. So does it mean we shouldn't try? No, I think we should, we should keep trying. We all know what the problem is. We know the things that'll fix it. We have to keep going. But I go back to the biggest thing for me and for what we've always felt is the message and changing the culture. And I think you all have this, huge advantage, because you can say to them, is this really what you thought faith was about? And if it's not about respect for everyone else, well, then there's something missing here. So we're glad to go that direction. And I apologize that Jack, you asked me to do this on Friday and I've been on vacation, so you didn't get any fancy presentation. You just got me doing this. So I'll be glad to go into any questions or anything like that you want to do next.
I think you have been quite fancy and quite informative. And we're all grateful for what you've shared with us in this forum so far. And I would believe folks in the Zoom would have questions. Before they start asking, I do want to point out that Kathy Woodard is with us today also from the coalition, does communication work. And we're so proud that she's happy, joining the family as well. Very happy about that development as well. And so, hello, Kathy, welcome to you in the space.
Thank you.
And you've already made your presence known with a Zoom, with a chat, a text in the chat. And so thank you for doing that. How about questions for Toby from anybody in our Zoom audience today? If you have any from the actual Zoom itself or on Facebook, make your questions known, if you would, to Toby. And while people are getting their questions together, I would just say, it seems to me that within the public debate will be the question about what makes for a legitimate threat. A threat to someone may not be a threat to somebody else. And so if someone's carrying a concealed weapon and they produce it because they may feel threatened, then I would wonder what makes for a legitimate threat. Or does anything go with that threat as justification for producing a weapon and firing it on somebody?
Yeah. I asked some of the Ohio elected officials that at a hearing once. They said, you do realize they're all arming themselves against you guys because you're the ones that are threatening to them. And as far as what you're saying, how does that work? Because if you guys are walking around with a gun in your pocket, that's a threat to me.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you have it. And so there we go around in circles on the culture again. Yeah. Who defines that threat? And they haven't. They have never done that.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me concerned. Well, I'm at the grocery store parking lot, and I walk in my car, and people will click their locks when they see me coming. I could be a threat. As far as the state is concerned, and so
you certainly could.
So there are some real considerations we have to make up concerning this law. Pastor Henneman has put a question in the chat. Pastor, you want to read that question aloud for us?
Yes, you caught me drinking water.
Welcome, Pastor. Welcome.
Thank you, Toby, for all the things you shared. What are the opportunities that we have here in Ohio to work across the state, to work locally for more gun control, for safer communities? How can we affect change here? You mentioned the federal law that was passed, that was one of the most significant in a long time. And I guess part of the question too is what's achievable, knowing the legislature that we have and what we have to work with or what we need to work against. What's achievable? What can we do?
Well, I think some of those things, even like in the bill that they just introduced here in Ohio, I think some of those things are achievable. And what usually happens, if you've worked with any of this stuff, is they'll stick this whole package together and they know darn well they're not going to get it all. So they might get one thing there. And so anybody that can give them any of these people that introduced this, and it is Senate Bill 351, is that right, Kathy?
Yeah, new one that just came out.
Yeah. That maybe that you can't buy anything until after you're 21. It might be one little piece that you pick out of there, but definitely to give all these senators support so that they know that they've got people back here that are saying you're doing the right thing. And I think we have to keep working on that, but our expectations have to know that what we're doing when we're working on it is we're educating everybody, through press releases, through what we do in our social media, through what we're doing at the State House. We are educating what needs to be done. And so that is sometimes what we're going to get rather than the actual passage of the bill. And I think that does make a difference. And I think that you all have an opportunity, because you have an audience, to be able to say that they have to be part of fixing this, and they can pick their way to do it, whether that's supporting a person, a law, or whether it's just doing some things in where they live. Mm-hmm. We've had a project going on for years that we gave people signs that said no guns are allowed to be carried in here. And the purpose of that was to be able to have a business put that sign right next to the no smoking sign, because they are both public health issues. And so everybody that is coming into that facility ought to know that for their safety, they're not allowing either one. So it's kind of some unique things like that, I think, that does change the culture. And those are the things that we can do. Did that answer anything? And then the rest of it is that because we're all going to work on this together, that you're going to come up with all these new creative ways to make change.
Yes, we are. Other questions? Well, I've got one while we wait for others. Or Bob, was your hand up, Bob?
No, I was just moving.
Okay. Well, Toby, what about the issue of teachers being permitted to carry guns into schools? What do you think about that?
Well, that was another one of our big fights recently. And I was happy. That's the other group of people now that are joining us all, is the teachers all over the place. They're saying, now, if you're going to tell me I have to do this, I'm not going to teach anymore.
Mhm.
And I think parents are going to be saying, if you're going to tell me all the teachers that I've known, again, do you know any teachers that shouldn't be carrying? And we've all known some that, then I'm not going to send my kid to that school anymore. So you're going to have those kind of things. And I don't know that they will easily give up the fight on that. But it's another part of that normalization again. What does that say to our children? We've already told them that they're going to have to do these drills and they're going to have to fight the so-called bad guys. And in some schools, they teach them to throw books and rocks and all this kind of stuff. And now you're going to tell them, well, some of your teachers, parents should have to tell them, some of your teachers in your school might be carrying guns. What's that message? Is that message to the next generation that everybody ought to carry them? Even my teachers carry them. And of course, the danger is the fact that they're not trained in any of it. And we have one member on our board that has a background that looked into it once. And she would tell you that if you can't react in less than a half a second, you're not going to win. If that person's got a gun and you've got a gun, you are not going to be able to react that fast to shoot them before they start shooting, because they already came into the situation, with the intent to start pulling the trigger, and you had to go through a process.
Yeah.
To get it. And then, now we've watched the horror that has just happened down in Texas, and the fact that these people did not react at all. That's, all those law enforcement, it's going to be years before we find out all the truth on that one. But would it have worked if that teacher would have had a gun in her hand? We'll never know. But what would she have been able to do it? Because she's a teacher, she's a caretaker, she's there, to educate children. And she would have seen another young man. Would she have been ready to take his life? Or would it have made it worse? I don't know how that one could have made it worse. But it's sort of a dream, a fantasy that you're going to be able to arm all these teachers. I don't think they're going to do it, and it is not mandatory. The governor put out this great big long statement sort of defending the fact that he signed this, and said this, this is something that he would still, I think the last paragraph said he would still prefer that if somebody was going to be armed in a school, that it be a resource officer. Well, that's always been our argument. If you have to have one, it ought to be a resource officer for a couple of reasons. He has to go through his training every year. He also has to go through training to know how to treat children and to diffuse things. So he's got a whole lot of experience there that others don't have. And he is responsible to whoever his police chief is, because he's hired from the police department. I can't figure out if we, if we arm not only teachers, any staff member, okay, if we arm these people, who's going to be checking on them that they're still okay, and that they, that they still ought to be the ones. And in schools where they've had them, they've had people that, they've left their gun in the wrong place and a kid gets a hold of it. Or what, you can just come up with all kinds of scenarios. So it's, again, for us, it's that whole normalization and change of culture that it says to everyone, whether that's the city or the school or the kids, that we have to be armed against one another. And if we have to be armed against one another, as you asked, Jack, then what's the criteria for us being afraid of that other? For whatever reasons, the way they acted, the way they looked, what color they are, what nationality they are, doesn't matter. I mean, what is that thing that produces enough fear that justifies us shooting a gun?
Thank you. The council's associate director, Dr. Amariah McIntosh, is on with us. Dr. McIntosh, you have a question.
A question and an observation, or at least a memory. When I relocated to Louisville, Kentucky in 1998, the state legislature there get this, had just passed a bill that allowed clergy to carry guns into worship facilities.
Clergy. Wow.
They were even allowed to keep them in the pulpit.
Wow.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I know church meetings could get cantankerous. I've heard personally of some pastors who have placed a 45 on the table before meeting and declare we ain't having no trouble today.
You can do that in Ohio. You
Yeah.
can do that in Ohio. Yeah, yeah.
But
And
again, and it's always been my thinking that having guns eliminates the people's need for meaningful conversation and understanding. If you make me angry enough, I just get a gun and end the argument.
Mhm.
You still may not be right, but you can end the argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the common sense of it is what I don't get of why our government officials don't seem to see. And you're right, I heard you speak in the beginning about if we were expecting that even after all of the numerous gun battles or mass shootings that were happening at middle schools and high schools and even some college campuses.
Mhm.
But when somebody went in and took out 20-something first graders, and that wasn't our enough is enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in Washington at a meeting when
Mhm.
that happened, when Sandy Hook happened.
Yes.
And we organized
At some point,
organized press
yeah.
in that afternoon, and we were out in front of the White House. And
Yes.
the White House press secretary had said something about, today is not the time. Well,
Right.
for those of us,
It's too soon, right?
yeah, for those of us that have been there, done that, and I did speak at that press conference, and I said, yeah, now is exactly the time. We're
Mhm.
all tired of waiting. These were babies. We just got
Right.
babies. And if you can't do something now, and of course, there were presidents that tried to make it happen and couldn't get the
That's
the
it.
cooperation. But
Yes.
you're talking about some of the ministers, having them. I also have heard, and you all might have better tabs on some of this because you have opportunity to hear more. But there's been so many shootings that have happened in churches
Yes.
and in synagogues.
Yes.
And robberies that have happened of the collections, that more and more churches and pastors are armed or have someone there that is armed in order to prevent that. And there just seems to me, it just is contradictory for me to be able to preach what you all are going to preach and then also say, but I've got an armed guard at the door. For some reason or other, like you say, it sort of stops. Well, we don't have to talk to one another because that's how we're going to fix it. If somebody comes in,
Mhm.
but the long term.
And all I have to say is I believed I was in danger.
Yes.
There may not be a threat of any kind, but just to say it,
Yeah.
Which always troubled me of how policemen always walked away from murder charges by saying,
I fear for my life.
I thought that 10-year-old kid
Yeah.
was afraid for my life encountering an unarmed 10-year-old Black kid.
Yep.
In 3
And
seconds.
I'm thinking, I've lived in some bad neighborhoods, or ministry has taken me into some spaces which are a lot more, which should probably cause a lot more fear than you with all that equipment you've got. You know, and with all of your training and all of your equipment, if that's your defense, maybe you shouldn't be in law enforcement in the first place.
Maybe not.
Mhm.
Maybe not. And then that's a different part. That's a different part of the fight
Mhm.
is when are they going to police their own?
Yes.
When are they going to decide that it's not enough to
Mm.
be able to do the physical
Yeah.
stuff to be a policeman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bob's
Psychologically,
got his hand up.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a comment first and then two linked questions. There was a news story about a month ago about a physical fight between two people standing in the middle of I-71. It might have been I-70 or 270.
Mhm.
And they were actually physically fighting with each other in the highway. I don't know exactly what happened, but part of the story described how many people watching that had their weapons drawn. It never would have occurred to me that people watching two people fighting in the middle of the street would have their weapons drawn. That was just totally shocking,
Wow.
like the new normal or whatever.
Yeah. Was
Mhm.
it a weapon in one hand and their camera in the other? And probably.
I can't reconstruct. I skimmed the story, not expecting I would talk about it a month later.
Yeah, I looked at it briefly too, because I could two grandkids that live down there and I thought, what, okay, where is it that now that they need to be careful of? But there are, you're talking about, police and their reactions and all of that. We keep watching that happen, everywhere. And part of this new, permitless carry bill that they passed also included that you don't have to tell law enforcement that you're carrying.
Mhm.
You can have one in the car and you don't have to
Yeah.
tell them. And we said, how is that going to work if you're a young black man
Exactly.
and you're carrying a gun and you don't tell them?
Mhm.
Now we got the whole fear thing. Now, he was afraid because he wasn't told and now he can see one.
Yeah.
It's just a vicious circle.
So here's my two related questions.
Mhm.
When I got on Coda Bus, there's a sign that says no drinking, no smoking, no loud music, no illegal weapons. I've read that sign each time I get on the bus for the past 6 months, wondering what that actually includes now.
Mhm.
Can people walk onto a Coda Bus with AR-15s and just ride normally like other passengers? And then the State House is another linked question. Are they going to not be allowed to bring them into the State House? I know at the Michigan State House, there was a whole group of people that got up in the balcony with hundreds of weapons.
Right now, you cannot carry into the State House. They'll let you carry everywhere else, but you can't carry into the State House.
Okay.
So
So Coda Bus, I could carry an AR-15.
Mhm.
actually, you can walk right down. We had an event once down in front of the Columbus City Hall, and the guys all showed up and said, "Hi, Toby." And I said, "Hi." And they pranced back and forth on the sidewalk in front of the event, carrying their assault
There you
weapons
go.
openly because they can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's all, should
Yeah.
I have been afraid then, like you're saying, that you had another part to your question, right?
I'm finished. I had the two locations, State House and Coda Buses, and the
Oh, the
comment.
Coda
about
buses,
fighting
yeah.
on the street.
Illegal, you brought up the illegal guns. That's a term that I've been fighting for 20 years or more, because the only thing that's illegal is a machine gun. All right, everything else, the firearm is legal. The process of getting it might not have been legal. The person that's using it might not be able to, shouldn't legally have one, but the gun itself is a legal commodity that we allow to be sold all over the country. So when they say illegal guns, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean if you are illegally carrying one, if you're somebody that shouldn't have one? It's very, very vague. And it ought to just say no guns.
I'm an editor, so that kind of distinction is important to hear.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of times in media, we will hear somebody say it was a licensed gun. We don't have licensings in this country. Some of the states do, but there's no licensing here. And most people think that if you're a gun owner, that you have had a background check and you are licensed.
Yeah.
And neither one of those things are true. You could have gone to the nearest, garage sale. I've seen them sold at garage sales. You could have gone to a garage sale and purchased the gun. It's legal. And you don't have to register it anywhere.
Yeah.
The only registration involved at all is from the manufacturer to the dealer. He knows what he gave the dealer and he knows the numbers on the weapons. And that dealer has to keep that private. He cannot share that information. But when he sells that weapon, he can write down the person and the serial number on the gun.
Hmm.
Should that gun ever be found to be a criminal, used in a criminal proceeding, they can go back and see who the first buyer was. Not the sixth or seventh or eighth one after they resold it that many times, but the first one.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing you can even come close to licensing on. There just isn't any such thing.
Not completely relevant, but the guy who set off a smoke bomb in a New York subway and then shot people, but nobody got killed, bought that gun in Columbus, Ohio on East Main Street.
Did he? Ooh,
That
okay.
was part of the news story.
Yeah.
At a dealer's or was it? Do you remember if it
Unfortunately,
was-
I can't go back at this point, but it was
Yeah,
maybe a mile and a half east of High Street on East Main Street. I looked at the building actually with Google Maps momentarily. I can't remember anything now.
Yeah. Hmm.
That was like
it
in the
might
New
have
York.
been the one, you've got a dealer down there in Columbus. This is one of the largest dealers in the country as far as selling guns that have ended up in crimes. And we visited with them. And we're trying to get them to adopt a whole new procedure. But it didn't go through because of the national group that was going to finance it decided that they weren't going to do it. So we kind of had to give up on that. But we were trying to actually work with that dealer. For instance, that's another good place. Don't ever sell a gun to somebody unless you've gotten approval in their background check.
Hmm.
And right now, if they don't hear it all in 3 days, they can go ahead with the sale.
Hmm.
And that, yeah, I mean, hey, look, either you take the time, to find out that the person doesn't have a record or not, and you don't get to give it to them in 3 days just because you haven't got the record back yet. So there's all those little nuances that, nobody knows. Are you giving me more information, Kathy?
Yeah, I thought it was a pawn shop and it was.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mistakenly said gun shop. I
Yeah.
retract what I said. I knew it was some small building on the
Okay.
north side of Main Street. I remember seeing that just on the picture without pursuing it.
Yeah.
They suggest it was legal, legally purchased. Way back.
If they did a background check, nothing came back, the person wasn't a felon. You could still get by with it if you got a lot of different kind of misdemeanors, no matter what they're for. And so that's, there are some other people that have been looking into that for years. There's one researcher at Johns Hopkins that feels very strongly that what we ought to be looking at is more things that prohibit somebody from being able to purchase a gun. Like if you've been arrested 6 times for drunk driving, that ought to be a real good signal that you probably shouldn't be able to purchase a gun, because your judgment certainly not going to be good while you're holding a gun,
Yeah.
if you've been
Yeah.
drinking. Those kind of things that can be done.
Yeah. Endangerment. Yeah.
Now that the Supreme Court has passed this, I don't know what will happen with some of those things.
Mhm. Hmm. Well, Toby, our time is
You're
approaching.
supposed to be all enthused now about all these new ideas you're going to have.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah. And I've made some notes, and I'm sure others have made notes, but
Well, they've always said we now have the best government money can buy. So
Mm.
whoever's willing to pay the price,
Good.
they give them what they want.
yes.
that's good. Yep.
But I think we, this is a moral conversation, and you
Yes.
pointed out earlier, Toby, and I'm so glad that by virtue of the council now embracing this priority, that is reducing gun violence, we will have those discussions, more of them within the chambers of the church, but certainly beyond the church and beyond Christianity, because we have to have these conversations now. And Toby, your work has been so crucial to helping shape minds and change hearts over the years. Thank you for who you are, for using your pain of losing a loved one to gun violence productively in such a way where you have worked for the common good. And it's a pleasure to know you and to receive this work from you in the coalition, and to know that you are there to give wisdom, even from vacation, you're there to give wisdom.
That's part of my life as well. I've always done that, but I think Kathy would agree. And I asked my husband, we're happy to be part of the family.
Well, we are glad you are, Kathy, glad you're part of the family. And this is not our last word, believe me. This is not our last Zoom on this subject matter. And so Toby, thanks for taking time from your vacation to be with us.
It's another one of the things that you can do. You know, what can we do? Yeah. And there's all kinds of people that you could have on as guests, you know, that you could do a lot of different Zooms and meetings. So,
yes.
But thank you.
You are quite welcome. We are grateful to you. Thanks for being with us today. I want to ask Dr. McIntosh to give us some announcements and then give us our closing prayer.
All right. We thank you guys again for sharing with us today, and for those who may be watching us on YouTube, and we will upload the recording later to Facebook because somehow I couldn't connect to Facebook. Technology is great when it works. On July the 11th is the council's mental health Mondays. And our next presentation will be again at this time, 3:30 p.m. And Toni Epperson, a licensed social worker from Toledo, Ohio. Her organization is called Transformative Solutions, LLC. And she is going to come to talk to us about mental health and families, because mental health doesn't affect just the person who may have the mental health issue, but it affects the whole family. I recall years and years ago when I took my children to the pediatrician, and the first question the pediatrician asked my children was, did they smoke? And I'm like, no, my children don't smoke. He says, well, do you smoke? And I had to admit that at that time I was a smoker. He says, well, if you smoke, they smoke, because they're inhaling what you're doing. It may not be exactly the same, but I recognize that in all families, any person dealing with mental health impacts everyone.
Yeah.
And so Toni is coming to share with us on how, as people of faith especially, how we can minister to and gain an understanding of mental health issues as they affect families. That will be at 3:30 p.m. It'll again be on Zoom. We will get the communication out as soon as she gets me her picture and bio, and we'll have it promoted. Toby and Kathy, again, glad to have y'all on board with the council and for sharing your story with us today. Pastor Henneman, thank you for joining us today. Susan McGarvey, thank you for joining us. Last but not least, Bob Ream. Okay, my phonics lesson failed me there. Bob Ream, our friend of the council, who is always present with us and is such a great support and a great contributor, and he always keeps us honest.
And I met you live and in person at Trinity
Yes,
Church in
at
Capitol
the
Square.
616, yeah, how we had a 616, stop 616 on 616.
6.
And I got
And
to
we
visit
ha-
the Ohio Council of Churches office,
Yes.
including
Yes.
Jack's office. It could be called the upper room.
That's about accurate description. Bob, you weren't supposed to tell him I let you see his office.
Oh.
I realized he wasn't there, but I hope it was okay to
Yes.
peek in there momentarily.
It's
Yeah, we
always-
just let him take a peek. That's all.
It's always okay.
Yes. So until we gather again, let us prepare ourselves to continue to be the voice crying in the wilderness, to let communities know that guns are not necessary for a culture to live and to thrive. Shall we pray? We thank you, oh God, for this time we spent. We thank you for Toby and for Kathy. We thank you for their work. Thank you for their passion. Thank you for the call that you have placed upon them to be a necessary voice in the state of Ohio and around the nation. Gun violence that has become a public health epidemic in our nation. We cry out, how long, O Lord? And we thank you for voices, and we thank you for the bodies of Toby and Kathy and others who embrace this work and seek, sometimes when it appears no one is listening, to continue the cry and the call to end gun violence, to end the idolatry of having guns, recognizing, God, that they are not conducive to life that is described as beloved community. All who are with us, bless them as they go about their lives and their activities. And as I always say, make us a reflection of your love and your grace. This is our prayer. We pray in your name. Amen and amen.
Amen. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
See you next month.
Yep.
Peace. Peace to you all.
Lisa says bye.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Kathy. Bye, everybody.
Yes.